Ideal mesmo para o mundo atual seria fazer o ensino médio junto com o curso técnico, certo? É no Senac que o aluno tem autonomia de verdade, formação cidadã, foco na diversidade, preparação para o Enem, material didático sem taxas e muito mais. Na real, tem tudo que você precisa para se sentir preparado para a vida. Seja para entrar no mundo do trabalho ou te ajudar a decidir o que fazer na faculdade. Quer saber? Senac. Vem comigo! Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino-médio-técnico.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, it's an open line Friday. I will take your phone calls here momentarily. By the way, if you're calling and it's disconnecting, it's a problem on our end. We've got 3 people on hold, and which I've always wanted to have just 3 lines because that's what Rush Limbaugh had. Should be a little more exclusive to call into a radio program these days. But if you're calling, it's disconnecting you instead of you getting a busy signal, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. It happened a couple weeks ago and got fixed, and now it's happening again. We'll deal with it, but it's not your phone, I promise. But also, you don't have to text me. Okay. I got to talk to you about an actual subject that should be important and on everyone's mind, and it's not, because for us, it's out of sight, out of mind. One of the things that I do tend to do this more than other conservative talk radio show hosts is talk about not just politics and what's happening in Washington, but what's happening around the world, because I grew up overseas and I got an eye and an ear towards it and thoughtful because of it. And I just don't think that a lot of you can appreciate, who did not have the experience I had growing up in the Middle East, what it means to be an American. There are a lot of people who just take it for granted that you're an American. Whoop-de-doo, you don't understand what it means to have an American world order. You don't understand what it means to have other countries understand that if you're an American citizen, they better watch out for you. But also, in some countries, it puts a target on your back. There was a time growing up in the Middle East I very distinctly remember as terrorism was on the rise, plane hijackings were on the rise, Iran and Iraq were fighting, Hezbollah tried to blow up my school. That for a time, being Eric Erickson and having a father who is Swedish, even though he's born and raised in Florida, my parents told me, my mother in particular, tell people you're Swedish. More often than not, though, you wanted people to know you were an American. It is a sad and damning fact about the Biden administration that multiple hostages held by Hamas are American citizens, and this president has done nothing. When you think about the American citizen held back in the day prior to World War I in northern Africa, and Teddy Roosevelt's message was they wanted the American citizen alive, even if it meant that the person holding him was dead. And the American citizen was rescued alive. It should mean something to be an American. And many Americans these days just want to withdraw from the world stage and say it doesn't affect us. But we live in a globally integrated system, and the question is who's going to be in charge of it, us or the Chinese at this point, the Chinese and their friends. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. We can't undo the world order. All that can be undone is us within the world order, and I don't want to see that happen. But unfortunately, we're steps closer to that happening because of the seeds of destruction sown by Barack Obama. Again, I don't want to make this about politics, but you do have to understand the background. A decade or so ago, civil war broke out in Syria. When I was a kid, I went to Syria. I have been to Damascus. The Assad family has ruled Syria with an iron fist for generations. Hafez al-Assad was the father of the current leader, Bashar al-Assad. Hafez al-Assad died. His son is not quite the man his father was, although they're all ruthless. And they, in the 1980s, in the Cold War, were aligned with the Soviets and have always been aligned with the Soviets. And when the Soviet Union fell, they maintained their ties with the Russians, but also because of the Soviet largesse was gone, they built ties with Iran. Part of the reason they built ties with Iran was because the guy next door to them, who you all know, Saddam Hussein, was the leader of the Ba'athist Party of Iran. For a time in the 60s and 70s, Syria and Egypt united as one nation. Ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and the Ba'athist Party. The Ba'athist Party, Hafez al-Assad was the leader of the Ba'athist Party of Syria. Saddam Hussein, the leader of the Ba'athist Party in Iraq. And they coveted each other's territory. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Iran and Iraq hated each other, so Hafez al-Assad got into bed with the Iranians because he was the leader of one Ba'athist party, Saddam Hussein the leader of the other. They rivaled each other for control. They began to hate each other, so Syria began to ally with Iran and the Soviet Union, while Iraq maintained fairly Western ties, although we were always deeply suspicious of him because we knew the sort of man he was. The Ba'athist Party is the Arab Nazi Party. The Muslim Brotherhood had ties back in the day to Hitler and the Nazis. The Ba'athist Party was a formal political party. And by the way, before someone texts me again, because I got this the other day, Ba'ath, like bath water, Ba'athist, not Baptist. The Ba'athists, they will dance. The Baptists, they will not. The Baptists and the Ba'athists both say they don't drink, but they both do. But the Ba'athists actually will dance in the streets, and the Baptists, God forbid they're ever seen dancing. People think they're having an epileptic fit. The Ba'athist Party is tied to the Nazis. The leaders, the original leaders of the Ba'athist Party, were trained by the Nazis, and they were their allies in the Middle East. They hate the Jews. Hafez al-Assad was able to balance territorial interest in Syria and tribal interests in Syria and rule with an iron fist. His son is not the father. Civil war broke out about a decade ago in Syria when Barack Obama was president of the United States. Barack Obama, you must recall, does not believe in American leadership in the world. Barack Obama actually believed that the United States was a destabilizing force in the world. And if the United States would humble itself and treat itself as just one of 198 countries on the planet, instead of being the leader of the Western world, the world would have peace. Now, you should understand that it is absolutely quintessential textbook world history and geopolitical dynamics that the most unstable period of time on planet Earth is a multilateral nation-state system. There are three systems on planet Earth. There is the hegemon. That is, you have the Pax Romana, the Pax Britannia, and the Pax Americana. When the Romans were in charge of the world was at peace. When the British were in charge of the world was at peace. When the Americans were in charge of the world, twice it's been that case, the world has been at peace. We are the only nation that has at two times been the global hegemon. Right after World War II and right after the Soviet Union fell. So you have a hegemonic role, you have a multilateral world, and then you have the superpower dynamics, two competing countries with spheres of influence. And that's actually more stable than having every nation unto itself. Barack Obama perversely believed that every nation unto itself working together diplomatically would bring the world peace. And in the history of the world, that's never been the case. So when the Syrian civil war started, Barack Obama wanted to protect American interests, but he refused to pick a side. He helped certain rebels and then at times would withdraw support. He would bomb the Syrian government, but it was very much a limp-wristed, effete response to the Syrian regime, which, again, is allied with the Russians and with the Iranians and with Hezbollah, a proxy state of Iran. Barack Obama never gave thought to how we could win this thing. And part of the problem was he didn't want to disrupt our relationship with Turkey because Turkey wants to be a regional hegemon and Turkey doesn't like Russia. Turkey doesn't like us right now. Turkey increasingly is looking like a Muslim fundamentalist state, even though historically it has not been. The Turks hate the Kurds. The Kurds are our allies. The Turks hate the Armenians. The Armenians had been our allies. Now the Russians have co-opted them because we didn't help them enough. So we're helping the Muslims of Azerbaijan, and we've joined the Turks with that. It's all a messy situation, in large part because Barack Obama did not want to provide moral clarity. The war continued through the Trump administration, and the Trump administration put American forces in Syria to undermine the Russians. We weren't at war, but we were protecting our military because one of the major fighters on the opposite side of Russia and Syria was ISIS, and we wanted to stop ISIS. But also the Russians wanted to hurt us. So Donald Trump was fine, and the media, of course, thinks that Donald Trump was in Russia's pocket. Donald Trump authorized Americans to kill Russians in Syria, and we did brutally so, beautifully so, frankly. The Russian special forces in Syria surrounded an American position, and we wiped them out, and that gets very little coverage in the press, but it's a true story. It gets very little coverage in the press because it would undermine the narrative that Donald Trump was in Russia's pocket. Well, along comes Joe Biden, the successor to Barack Obama, a man who Barack Obama's own Secretary of Defense said is wrong about every major event in foreign policy in the last 50 years. And Joe Biden has not had a clue what to do with Syria. So here's where we are, I regret to inform you. The Syrian government is now on the verge of collapse. The Russians have used their influence with Syria to maintain a Mediterranean port, warm water port, out of Syria. The Russians are now recalling every Russian citizen in Syria, telling them get out immediately. The Russians are closing their embassy and they're moving their ships out of port. There is a rumor the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, and his family have fled. And the rebels have taken over Aleppo, Hama, and other major cities. Here's a problem. Let's go back to Barack Obama. Barack Obama didn't want to take a leadership role. Barack Obama looked on disdain to the Syrian rebels. He refused to pick a side among the Syrian rebels, even though there were pro-Western rebels. His argument was that if he picked a side, it would embolden Russia and Syria, and it would embolden Middle Eastern leaders against that particular rebel group if he picked a side. It wasn't true, but that's what he hid behind. The media bought it. Well, guess what? The most Western of the rebels are now being wiped out by the Turks, and so guess which group is now leading the rebellion and taking over Syria? That would be what Barack Obama called the junior varsity al-Qaeda, ISIS. That's right. Anti-Western terrorists are on the verge now of taking over the entire country of Syria, all because Barack Obama back in the day refused to give any moral clarity to the idea of having some Western sympathetic rebels in charge. Joe Biden and his idiot foreign policy team has only made the situation worse. And so now you will not be surprised to learn the Israelis are thinking they are going to militarily have to build a buffer zone off the Golan Heights further into Syria to protect them from radical Islamists who are on the verge of taking over Syria. This is now going to spur a humanitarian crisis into Europe, which is already dealing with a refugee crisis, as more Syrians, including those friendly to the Assad regime, have to flee from ISIS and the bad terrorists. We had an opportunity to exercise American leadership, and we chose not to. And for all of you who are isolationists out there, who continue to believe we should cede the world stage to our enemies, this is what happens. Syria is on the verge of being taken over by ISIS, because we refused to act. It's not neocon, it's not nation state building, but we could have tipped our hand towards one of the rebel groups and allowed them to become the dominant party and worked with our supposed allies, the Turks, to make it happen. But we chose not to. So all the consequences and all of the fallout are going to be bad for us now because Barack Obama and Joe Biden sat on their hands and did nothing as this nation descended into civil war and now is failing.
Esse podcast é um oferecimento de Samsung Galaxy AI. E sabe o que mais ele te oferece? Que tal uma nova maneira de buscar na internet a partir de fotos ou do que está na sua tela? Fácil, fácil. Viu? Circulou? Encontrou. Ou quem sabe um assistente de notas para gravar reuniões, transcrever gravações e organizar, produzindo resumos eficientes. Tem tanta coisa que o Samsung Galaxy AI pode fazer por você. Clique aí no banner para descobrir o que. Galaxy AI, a inteligência artificial nas suas mãos.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson, oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. I want to go to Tom in Boston. Welcome to the show, Tom. How are you?
I'm good. Big honor, Eric. So wanted to run something by you about the differences in the presidential race results, top line versus down ballot, and a fear that I have on the implications for the Republican Party and a possible solution. So like we saw that Donald Trump outperformed lower ballot Republicans by 2 to 3%, especially in a lot of the swing states that Donald Trump won, but Senate races couldn't quite match. And so it could be from a couple reasons. One, that there are voters who are Trump only and nobody else, only voting for Donald Trump on the top and nothing on the down ballot, or from Democrats crossing over and voting for Donald Trump at the top of the ticket and Democrats the rest of the way. And so the RNC needs to have a plan to capture these voters. But my fear here is that they risk diluting their platform, either going full populist or just otherwise diluting the conservative platform that's the Republican basis, and end up becoming more of a liberal party. As Rush Limbaugh used to quote, an institution that's not dedicated to conservatism will eventually become liberal. And what I see as the solution here is the conservative factions in the party need to be teaching why conservatism in the Republican Party works and should be widely appealing, because otherwise the values of the party are going to continue to erode, and the conservative factions may split from the party, as we almost saw with the pro-life uproar during the campaign when Donald Trump declined to have a federal anti-abortion mandate. And rather than trying to articulate the pro-life position, a lot of the pro-life leaders threatened to avoid voting there. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Okay. So, Tom, that's such a more complex and in-depth question than I can probably do in the next 20 seconds because of the ad. So let me make you a promise. When I come back from commercial break, it's relevant to what I wanted to get to anyway. So I'm actually going to make a sticky note here. Answer Tom's question. And when we come back from break, I won't forget. I'm going to stick it right here on my monitor. And I'll do that. First, I want to tell you about Americans for Prosperity because I'm actually leaving tomorrow morning to go to Salt Lake City to do an event for them tomorrow night in Salt Lake. They're a great group, and they would love to have you on board. They're the largest leading grassroots organization in the United States, and they're on our side. What you can do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today and sign up with AFP. Be involved in their community of activists around the country. They have chapters in every state. You'll be the most informed member in your circle of friends. They'll teach you how to be a great activist and advocate for common sense conservative solutions in the country. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Sign up with them. Join me and AFP in fighting for the future in this country.
Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
Hello, welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. Glad to have you with me today. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, I'm removing the sticky note. Tom called from Boston, Massachusetts, and he wanted to know about the shakeup of the parties and what to do about the votes that went for Trump and they didn't translate into the GOP and realignment and the Republican Party and not necessarily being a party advancing conservatism anymore. And yes, Rush Limbaugh was right. Any organization not specifically set up to be conservative will over time become progressive. And that's not actually a truism of Rush. I forget. It's not Heinlein. Any organization, hang on, I got to find this. Any organization not conservative will become liberal because there are 3 rules. Yes. Yeah. Oh, was it John O'Sullivan? No. It was O'Sullivan. It was Robert Conquest's laws. Yes, Robert Conquest said any organization not explicitly and constitutionally right-wing will sooner or later become left-wing. John O'Sullivan as well had that rule as well. John O'Sullivan is a British conservative commentator. He worked for Margaret Thatcher. He's written at National Review. And he as well, all organizations that are not explicitly right-wing will over time become left-wing. It is a rule of conquest, a restatement of Conquest laws. Now, Conquest had 3 rules. Robert Conquest had 3 rules. Number 1, everyone's conservative about which she knows best. Number 2, any organization not explicitly and constitutionally right-wing will sooner or later become left-wing. And number 3, the behavior of any bureaucratic organization can best be understood by assuming it's controlled by a secret cabal of its enemies. So much of what people think is maliciousness out of the federal government is actually incompetence. One of the reasons that the left tries to undermine the American Constitution is because the American Constitution is explicitly and constitutionally structured as a conservative document. And I don't necessarily mean that in ideological terms, but it can be read as that because the Constitution explicitly restrains power and is premised on the idea of negative liberty, not positive liberty. Positive liberty is the government giving you what you need to live your best life now. Negative liberty is the government staying out of your way so you can live your life as you see fit. It's why the left wants the government to give you health care so you can become an artist and not have to deal with the travails of work. So they've got to undermine the American Constitution. Now, to Tom's larger point, Sean Trendy, who is way smarter than me, actually talked about this very thing on social media today, and he pointed out to someone saying there's not really this shift in American politics. It was just about Trump. It was for Trump. These people voted for Trump. They're not really headed to the GOP. Actually, if you go back to the 1950s, people have this idea that the South converted to the GOP because of racism. It's not really true. It actually began in World War II, this creeping, slow movement of votes in the South. And when Eisenhower ran for president, the South voted for Eisenhower. Now, part of it was he was a war hero, but that beginning to vote essentially gave the right and gave Southerners the permission structure to begin completely voting GOP. When you follow the trend lines, the South was still voting Democrat at the state level until the early 2000s. And at the federal level, had moved from just voting for president to voting for the Senate and House to suddenly voting for the state level. It took a very long time, and we're starting to see that happen now. Take, for example, Starr County, Texas, the most Hispanic county in America. 98% Hispanic. It has always voted Democrat. It voted for Donald Trump, and it has begun shifting its votes at the state level as well to the Republicans. We are going through a realignment. The South went through that realignment, and now minority groups are going through that realignment where they're beginning to vote right. To Tom's point, though, those of us who are conservative, who are worried about the intellectual drift of the Republican Party, have got to remember to make the case for conservatism. I am afraid that as the Republican Party begins to embrace bad economic ideas like tariffs, we could scuttle the whole operation because tariffs are going to lead to economic ruin. We got to be careful on that. Now, that leads me to the other thing the GOP needs to be, and that is the party of law and order. Daniel Penny's jury in New York appears to be a hung jury. The jury has told the judge that they cannot reach any level of reconciliation. They informed the judge that they cannot come to agreement on whether or not Daniel Penny should be convicted of manslaughter. That's good because in a progressive city like New York, it's probably going to be hard for Daniel Penny to be found not guilty, but having him have a hung jury is the second best thing that could possibly happen. This is from the New York Times from 2:22 p.m. Jurors in Manhattan sent a note on Friday to a judge overseeing the Daniel Penny trial, saying they have come to an impasse on whether he was culpable in the choking death of a disturbed subway passenger last year, leaving unresolved a case that's come to exemplify New York's post-pandemic struggles. After 3 days of deliberations, the jurors, 7 women and 5 men, wrote to the judge saying, "At this time, we are unable to come to a unanimous vote on count 1, manslaughter in the second degree." Justice Wiley, the judge in charge, responded by reading the jury an Allen charge, officially instructing the jurors to resume their deliberations with the goal of reaching an agreement through the reconsideration of different opinions. It is not uncommon for juries to believe they will never be able to reach a unanimous decision. I'll ask you to continue deliberations on that count. Justice Wiley said he had to decide if a unanimous agreement was impossible on the manslaughter charge before considering if the jury could move on to deliberating the second charge, criminally negligent homicide. For those of you who are unfamiliar, I'm just going to read you this section of this New York Times story. Prosecutors claim Daniel Penny, who had been in the military, choked the subway passenger Jordan Neely, a 30-year-old former Michael Jackson impersonator who struggled with mental health, when he held Mr. Neely in a chokehold for 6 minutes on the floor of an F train on May 1st, 2023. Neely had boarded the train that day and begun yelling at passengers, according to witnesses. As he strode through the subway car, he shouted about being hungry, saying he wanted to return to jail and that he did not care if he lived or died. Mr. Penny then approached Mr. Neely from behind and put him in a chokehold, taking him to the floor. Prosecutors say Mr. Penny's actions were not accidental and that he failed to recognize Mr. Neely's humanity, squeezing his neck tighter as he struggled to break free. They argued Mr. Penny's chokehold had killed Mr. Neely, pointing to testimony from the New York City medical examiner. Mr. Penny's lawyers argued his client's actions had not been the direct cause of Mr. Neely's death, instead suggesting it was a toxic combination of synthetic marijuana use, sickle cell trait, and mental illness that had killed him. The reality is that the people on that train did not dispute that they were in fear that Mr. Neely was going to harm them, and Mr. Penny saved them. There was a book published in 1939 called The Control of Language, A Critical Approach to Reading and Writing. It was referred to by some as the Green Book because it had a green cover. The book taught that that values are subjective and that statements about value are expressions of feeling. C.S. Lewis responded to the idea that all values are subjective and we're just stating our feelings with a book called The Abolition of Man. The very first chapter is called Men with Chests. And in the book, C.S. Lewis wrote this: the operation of the Green Book in its kind is to produce what may be called men without chests. It is an outrage that they should be commonly spoken of as intellectuals. This gives them the chance to say that he who attacks them attacks intelligence. It is not so. They are not distinguished from other men by any unusual skill in finding truth, nor any virginal ardor to pursue her. Indeed, it would be strange if they were. A preserving devotion to truth, a nice sense of intellectual honor, cannot be long maintained without the aid of a sentiment which the authors could debunk as easily as any other. It is not excess of thought, but defect of fertile and generous emotion that marks them out. Their heads are no bigger than the ordinary. And all the time, such is the tragic comedy of our situation, we continue for those qualities we are rendering impossible. You can hardly open a periodical without coming across the statement that what our civilization needs is more drive or dynamism or self-sacrifice or creativity. In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and demand its function. We make men without chests and expect them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful. We tell men to restrain themselves. We tell men to suppress all their emotions and their right and their wrong and use some objective strain of reason or some subjective strain of reason. And then we wonder, why won't people, when they see someone being attacked in the street, help? Along comes Daniel Penny, a man who still has his chest, and saves the passengers of that train from being assaulted by an insane man high on synthetic marijuana. That man dies while in police custody, not under Daniel Penny's care. And Daniel Penny is pinned as the bad guy. He's prosecuted for saving the people on the train. Eric Adams is the mayor of New York City.
To do something, and New Yorkers have always had the spirit and energy to come to their fellow New Yorkers, and we have to be honest about the severe mental health crisis that we're facing. In no way I want to do anything that's going to make the jury decision harmful in any way. He was going to be judged by a jury of his peers. They're deliberating. Let's let them do their job.
But here's the problem with the entire prosecution. As Eric Adams points out, people in New York are always told, if you see something, say something, take action to defend your neighbors. Daniel Penny did, and he's being prosecuted for taking action to save his neighbors. Who are your neighbors? Your neighbors are the people around you. They're not just your physical neighbors who live next door to you. They're the people in your community around you. Daniel Penny was an outsider who came into New York City, saw a crazy man on a train who was going to harm people on that train, and he took action to save those people. And those New Yorkers are now potentially trying to make him the fall guy. He's been prosecuted by the prosecutors in a city with a massive crime wave where they're allowing the criminals to get out of prison and they're prosecuting the good guys, keeping people safe. In New York City, they want men without chests. They want men without chests. They want men who are not men. They want men with no compulsion to do right because they don't want them to know what's right unless the elites get to tell them what is right. Daniel Penny should have never been prosecuted. And yet here we are with this situation. It is an abomination of justice that the bad man is treated as the victim and the hero is treated as the bad man. And yet that's what's happened in New York City. Those people, if they find Daniel Penny guilty, they will get exactly what they deserve, when from here on out, no one is willing to stand up, and probably even after this, even if the case is thrown out because of a hung jury, they will find fewer and fewer people willing to help. They will find fewer and fewer good men willing to do what must be done to keep people safe, because that's what New York City wants, is bad men going free and good men being punished. Now, before I get out of here, let me tell you about Vision Computer. Vision is a great place to buy a computer from. If you're looking at one this holiday season, Vision Computer, they can build you a computer and then they can be your service department. Now, I know people are apprehensive about new computers, particularly PCs, because you got to move over all the preferences, you got to move over all the apps, you got to move over all your documents. Vision can do it for you very easily, seamlessly. So your new computer is set up just like your old computer. They can even be your tech support. So you get a special number. You call them 15 seconds or less. You get the answer to what ails you. Call them at 404-COMPUTE and say, Vision, build me my computer. They'll work with you to get you what you want and what you need. And then if you ever have a question, you'll get the special number you call. 15 seconds or less, they give you the answer to your question. Let's say you're a business. You need to start buying your computers at the end of the year to offset your tax liability this year. Call them at Vision, and your employees, for every computer you buy, each employee will get your phone number, their phone number, so you don't even have to have the in-house IT people. Vision can help you every step of the way with your printer, with your email, you name it. $179 a year. If you don't have a computer from Vision, you can still get their incredible service. All you do is call them at 404-COMPUTE. You say Eric Erickson sent you, you're going to save even more money. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Let Vision Computers be your tech and IT support solution. Let them build you your new computer. Hello there. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. Phone number, well, too late. Those of you still on hold, I'm sorry. I realize it's Open Line Friday, but we've had a ton of stuff to get to as well, including two things I want to make sure I get to at the end. One, there's a video of a crazy homeless man on a New York City subway train, not just peeing on the floor, but peeing on passengers in the train. You're not going to get anybody to intervene to stop the guy, are you, because of what you've done to Daniel Penny, people in New York? You're not going to get anyone involved to do that. And in fact, progressives insist that this is what you should expect. We should all do public transportation, and you should expect to be harassed while you do it. It's a wild, wild scenario. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is a lawsuit that has been filed against Joanna Olson Kennedy. I'm just going to read you this thread by Lyra Saper. Joanna Olson Kennedy is the top name in pediatric, quote-unquote, gender-affirming care in the United States. She is being sued. This doctor doesn't believe in mental health assessments, according to Jessie Single, who has written about this in The Economist. She says, quote, I don't send someone to a therapist when I'm going to start them on insulin. The Children's Hospital Los Angeles doctor has referred children as young as 12 and 13 for, respectively, hormones and mastectomies. She's a recipient of the largest National Institutes of Health grant to study the off-label use of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. The New York Times revealed she refused to publish outcomes data on puberty blockers, fearing that the results might be cited by the critics. In other words, they'd be unimpressive. The plaintiff suing the doctor is Clementine Breen, a 20-year-old woman, and within the statute of limitations for medical torts, who received puberty blockers at age 12, hormones at age 13, and a mastectomy at age 14. Also named is the affirming therapist and surgeon. The doctor allegedly misrepresented Breen's psychiatric history in a letter of support she wrote to the surgeon approving Breen for mastectomy. The doctor allegedly said that Breen had a gender identity of male since childhood, but her own clinical notes supposedly contradict this. The doctor, who is a true believer in gender-affirming care, once said this about girls who have their breasts amputated and later regret it. Quote, if you want breasts at a later point in life, you can go and get them. Breen is represented by a pretty major law firm that has represented other detransitioners. Probably going to need to have more of these lawsuits. By the way, your tax dollars have given this doctor about $10 million to do research into the impact of early medical treatment in supposed transgender youth. I think the tide is beginning to turn on transgenderism. It is and always has been a mental health issue, and more people are realizing it. and we got a bunch of neurotics claiming it's normal. See you guys. Have a great weekend.